सो फ्रेंड्स, आज हम डिस्कस करेंगे एक इम्पॉर्टेंट केस, दैट इज़ द केस ऑफ हेमीप्लेजिया। हेमीप्लेजिया जिसे हिंदी में पैरालिसिस कहते हैं, फॉलिश कहते हैं। सो एग्जामिनर का फर्स्ट क्वेश्चन रहता है कि व्हाट इज़ योर डायग्नोसिस। सो आपने डायग्नोसिस कैसे बनाया ये हेमीप्लेजिया, तो आप क्या बोलोगे? सो यू विल से दिस इज़ ए केस ऑफ लेफ्ट साइडेड हेमीपेरेसिस और हेमीप्लेजिया. It is a case of left-sided hemiparesis or hemiplegia, and in the recovery, and it is due to cerebral thrombosis, involving the lenticulostriate branch of medial cerebral artery, and the lesion is in right internal capsule. So you will say this is a case of left-sided hemiparesis in the stage of recovery due to cerebral thrombosis. Underline here, this is important, that this is due to cerebral thrombosis, and it involves the lenticulostriate branch of the middle cerebral artery, and the lesion is in the right internal capsule. So it is a case of left-sided hemiparesis due to cerebral thrombosis involving the lenticulostriate branch of the middle cerebral artery, and the lesion is in the right internal capsule. This is how you will say the diagnosis of hemiplegia. Then examiner will ask, why do you say it is hemiplegia? Why it is hemiplegia? Then you will elaborate. Then you will say the history. Then you will say this is right-handed male patient, 60-year-old, presented with the complaint of weakness of the left side of the body, from the last 15 days. He is having weakness of the left side of the body. At the onset, when he was about to go to bathroom at about 5 a.m., he suddenly felt weak and could not move his left side. Around 5 a.m., he felt weak and he could not move his left side. The episode was sudden in onset. It was sudden onset, and the evolution of paralysis was completed within 6 hours. So the evolution completed in 6 hours. The patient complained of headache and vertigo at the beginning of the attack. But neither he lost consciousness nor he has any history of fall, though he has some behavioral abnormalities present at that moment. He was suffering from mild speech difficulty regarding fluency and was immediately hospitalized. The patient also said that the weakness was marked in the left upper limb in comparison to the left lower limb. So the weakness was marked in the left upper limb in comparison to the left lower limb. There was no loss of bowel and bladder control. There is no history of vomiting, convulsion, double vision, nasal regurgitation, nasal intonation, but he complained of deviation of the face to the right side during eating, speaking, and attempting smile. So he has the complaint of deviation of the face to the right side, and it occurs during eating, speaking, and attempting smiling. Though the disease started acutely, he was gradually improving in the hospital. So the disease started acutely, but it is gradually improving in the hospital. There is no history of fever, no history of head injury, palpitation, chest pain, breathlessness, previous neurodeficit of this type, which recovered completely, that is TIA. No family history of diabetes, hypertension, or tuberculosis was obtained. There was no history of contact with tuberculosis. There is no history of exposure to sexually transmitted disease. He did not give any history of diabetes, a non-smoker by habit. There was no history of waxing and waning. From the past few days, he was on physiotherapy. He was a government service holder and came from the middle class family. On examination, it shows that the patient is conscious, alert, and cooperative. He is hypertensive, but neither there is any valvular heart disease present, nor there is presence of any bruit over the carotid. He is suffering from upper motor neuron paralysis of the left upper limb and lower limb, including the paralysis of the lower half of the face, that is the UMN type of facial paralysis. So there is paralysis of the lower half of the left face. Left-sided complete hemiparesis. The UMN paralysis of the left side of the body is suggested by the presence of the clasp spasticity, loss of superficial reflux, brisk tendon reflux, and the presence of extensor plantar response. The neurological examination of the right side of the body was essentially normal. So this was your history. You have to elaborate this such a big history. I will repeat in history again in a fast method. So this is the right-handed patient who is 60-year-old, was complaining of the weakness of the left side of the body from the last 15 days. He is having the weakness of the left side of the body. At the onset weakness, he was about to go to the bathroom at about 5 a.m. At the onset, when he was about to go to the bathroom at about 5 a.m., he suddenly felt weak and could not move his left side. The episode was sudden in onset and the evolution of paralysis was completed within 6 hours. The patient complained of headache, vertigo at the beginning of the attack, but neither he lost consciousness nor there is any history of fall, though there was some behavioral abnormalities present at that moment. He was suffering from mild speech difficulty regarding fluency and was immediately hospitalized. The patient also said that the weakness was marked in the left upper limb in comparison to the lower limb of the left side. There was no loss of bowel and bladder. There is no history of vomiting, convulsion, double vision, nasal regurgitation, or nasal intonation. But he complained of deviation of the face to the right side during eating, speaking, and attempting smile. Though the disease started acutely, he was gradually improving in the hospital. There is no history of fever, head injury, palpation, chest pain, breathlessness, previous neurodeficit of this type which recovered completely. There is no family history of diabetes, hypertension, tuberculosis was obtained. There is no history of contact with tuberculosis, no history of exposure to sexually transmitted disease. He did not give any history of diabetes, a non-smoker by habitat. There is no history of waxing and waning. From the past few days, he was on physiotherapy. He was a government service holder and came from the middle class family. On examination, it shows that the patient is conscious, alert, and cooperative. He is hypertensive, but neither there is any valvular heart disease nor there is presence of any bruit over the carotids. He is suffering from UMN paralysis of the left upper and lower limb, including the paralysis of the lower half of the face, that is the UMN type of facial paralysis, left-sided complete hemiparesis or hemiplegia. The upper motor neuron paralysis of the left side of the body is suggested by the presence of clasp spasticity, loss of superficial reflex, brisk tendon reflex, and presence of extensor plantar response. The neurological examination of the right side of the body was essentially normal. So this is about the history. So this is the case. Then what is the importance of past history in hemiplegia? The question comes, what is the importance of past history in hemiplegia? The importance of past history in hemiplegia. What is its important? Similar type of attacks are monoplegia in the past which recovered completely, indicates TIA. Similar attacks which recovered indicates transient ischemic attack. Similar attacks which occur in the past and recover completely, it indicates in the past history you have similar attack. You will ask the patient, do you have similar attacks in the past? If he says yes, I have similar attacks in the past but is recover completely, it indicates it might be having the transient ischemic attacks. Then past history, head injury is important. History, head injury, past history of head injury. Then any history of hypertension. With hypertension and diabetes, these are the key history you have to take. With hypertension, you know hypertension can cause CNS bleed. It can also cause cerebral thrombosis. It can cause TIAs. So hypertension causes transient ischemic attack. It can cause hemorrhage. It can cause cerebral thrombosis. And it can cause lacunar infarctions. So this is about the hypertension. Diabetes is often associated with the hypertension and it accelerates the atherosclerosis. So this is the importance you have to say. There is past similar attack indicates the TIA, and the history of head injury, history of diabetes, hypertension, you should be knowing. Then other important history you can remember if you want to: any past history of rheumatic fever for valvular heart disease and cerebral embolism. Any past history of rheumatic fever you should be knowing. Any past history of epilepsy or migraine. Any past history of epilepsy or migraine. Epilepsy indicates the Torts palsy, and migraine the neurological migraine. Past history of TB to rule out tuberculoma, tuberculous arteritis, tuberculous meningitis that can manifest as hemiplegia. So past history of TB is important. Past history of use of oral contraceptive pill with duration may predispose to stroke in females if used for more than 5 years. So past history of OCP for more than 5 years can cause stroke. Any past history of anticoagulants or aspirin intake for any bleeding tendency in the past. Any history of anticoagulant intake or aspirin intake. Any history of fever to rule out meningitis. So past history of fever. Past history of exposure to sexually transmitted disease to rule out neurosyphilis. Past history of dyspnea or chest pain to rule out mitral stenosis or recent MI. Past history of intermittent claudication to rule out atherosclerosis or arteritis, and past history of weight loss. So we'll repeat the past history. The important past history of similar attacks in the past, similar attacks of paralysis in the past, which recovered completely, indicates the transient ischemic attack. History of head injury you should be knowing. History of diabetes and hypertension, and if you want to remember the rheumatic fever. Out of all those, so diabetes in the accelerate the process of atherosclerosis. Hypertension can cause hemorrhage, thrombosis, lacunar infarction, and TIAs. Then rheumatic fever. Then OCP for female is taking for more than 5 years, predisposed to stroke. Even anticoagulants and aspirin can cause brain hemorrhage and can predispose to stroke. So this you should be knowing about the past history. Then pattern of seizure disorder. For example, epilepsy. There is prodrome phase, then there is tonic phase, then there is clonic phase, and then there is post-ictal phase. So how does the pattern of seizure disorder pattern? First there is prodrome, then there is tonic, then there is clonic phase, then there is post-ictal phase. So these are the phases of seizure disorder: prodrome, tonic phase, clonic phase, post-ictal phase. In the prodrome phase, you will be having the change of mood, or aura will be there. You will be having aura. In tonic phase, there occurs the spasm of all the muscles. Patient may become unconscious and patient may fall. Unconscious fall, spasm can occur. In the clonic phase, there will be jerks in the limb and trunk, and there is, in the clonic phase, there is tongue bite in the clonic phase. And post-ictal phase, there is confusion, amnesia, headache, flaccidity in post-ictal phase. So these phases you have to remember. What happens in seizure disorder? There are phases. There is prodrome, where we get the aura. Aura is change of mood. Then tonic phase, the spasm of all the muscles, the patient become unconscious and fall. In clonic phase, there is jerks of the limbs and trunks, and there may be trunk bite in clonic phase. And post-ictal phase, there will be confusion, amnesia, headache, and flaccidity. So this is your seizure disorder, the phases of seizure disorder. Then what is Torts palsy? Following epileptiform convulsion. The examiner can ask, what is Torts palsy? It occurs following epileptiform convulsions. There may be development of paralysis. Following epileptiform convulsion, there is development of paralysis, commonly monoplegia. So there is paralysis, mostly monoplegia rather than hemiplegia. Following epileptic form convergence, there is development of paralysis, usually monoplegia due to exhaustion. This paralysis occur due to exhaustion of cerebral neurons. So there is paralysis following the epileptic upon convulsions that can cause the exhaustion of the cerebral neurons and is known as Torts palsy. Torts palsy is usually recovered within 24 hours. So if it is Torts palsy, it usually recover within 24 hours. So Torts palsy occur following the epileptic convulsion. There is development of paralysis, usually monoplegia, which is due to the exhaustion of the cerebral neurons and is known as the Torts palsy. So this was the Torts palsy. It occurs following the epileptic where there is paralysis, usually monoplegia, and because of the exhaustion of the cerebral neuron, and recovery occur within 24 hours. Then examiner can ask, oh, can you tell me the importance of family history in hemiplegia? So importance of family history in hemiplegia. Then you will say diabetes, hypertension, epilepsy or migraine. This is important. Diabetes, hypertension, epilepsy or migraine, and similar illness among other members of the family, especially young patients, cerebral diplegia, spinocerebral degeneration. Yes, similar illness in the family members, especially in young patient, where you have to think of cerebral diplegia, spinocerebellar degeneration. So importance of family history, you should be asking the family history for diabetes, hypertension, epilepsy, migraine, and similar family history, similar illness in the family members. So importance of personal history is similar, like hypertension, diabetes, smoking history, obesity. This is about the personal history. Hypertension, diabetes, smoking, hyperlipidemia, and a strong family history of CVA. Strong family history. So this is about the importance of family history. Then come the question, what are the chief complaints of your patient? The examiner can ask what are the chief complaints, then you will say he is having the weakness of left side of the body from last 15 days, and weakness from last 15 days, weakness of the left side from last 15 days, and he's also having the deviation of the face to the right side while eating or speaking from last 15 days. Deviation to the right side, weakness of the left side, and difficulty in speech from last 15 days. So this is the chief complaint: weakness, deviation, and difficulty in speech. Then examiner can ask, inquire regarding the paralysis in the history of present illness. So प्रेजेंट इलनेस को डिस्क्राइब करने के लिए एग्जामिनर कहता है, तो यू विल से फर्स्ट ऑफ ऑल the onset you should know the date and time of onset of the paralysis. It is important, date and time should be knowing. Then the mode of onset, whether it was sudden or it is gradual. The paralysis was sudden onset, which indicates vascular etiology, infective etiology, or traumatic or demyelinating etiology. Traumatic or demyelinating etiology. So vascular, infective, traumatic, or demyelinating etiology was sudden onset. Gradual onset indicates the intracranial space occupying lesion. Intracranial space occupying lesion indicates the gradual onset of paralysis. While if it is sudden onset, you think of vascular, infection, trauma, demyelinating disorder. Then if it is embolism, we have the embolism, we have the thrombosis, and we have the hemorrhage. Three things we can have: either cerebral embolism, either cerebral thrombosis, or cerebral hemorrhage. So if it is embolism, it has a very stormy onset, it occurs in seconds, while thrombosis occurs in minutes to hours, while hemorrhage is very sudden in onset with the rest with relentless progress. It is very sudden. Just like embolism occurs in seconds, it occurs very sudden onset. Hemorrhage, thrombosis occur in minutes to hours. Then if you are thinking it to be infective etiology, it occurs in hours to days. Infective etiology occurs in hours to days, and demyelinating disorders occurs in days to weeks if it is demyelinating. So this you should be knowing, then only you can assess what is the pathology going on inside the body. You should be knowing if embolus occurs in seconds, embolus within seconds, hemorrhage which has very sudden onset and relentless progress, hemorrhage, thrombosis within minutes to hours, then hours to days is your infection, and days to weeks is your demyelinating disorders. So I will write it down. If it occurs in seconds, occurs in minutes to hours, hours to days, days to weeks, we just discussed is demyelinating. Within seconds is your embolism, cerebral embolism. Minutes to hours is your cerebral thrombosis. Then hours to days is your infective etiology. And very sudden onset and progress relentlessly is your hemorrhage. Very sudden and progress is relentless. That is your Then what are the precipitating factors for your hemiplegia? Precipitating factors. Then you will say during sleep or soon after rising from the bed usually occurs in cerebral thrombosis. Cerebral thrombosis occurs during sleep or from rising from bed. For example, the patient can say, as I was getting up from the morning, I having the feeling of weakness, and usually it occurs in case of cerebral thrombosis. So what was the duration of cerebral thrombosis? Cerebral thrombosis develops in minutes to hours. So at the extreme exertion or activity, if occurs in exertion or activity, it indicates embolism. Embolism occurs in exertion or activity. Then at the height of emotion, you have the hemorrhage, cerebral hemorrhage at the height of emotion. Then during the height of emotion, activity, exertion, subarachnoid hemorrhage can occur in height of emotion, during exertion, during activity, subarachnoid hemorrhage. Then fifth case is that if it occurs following fever, after fever, you are developing what you should be think following fever, patient develops the paralysis. First he's having the fever, then he develops, then you think of cerebral abscess, encephalitis and meningitis. Cerebral abscess, encephalitis and meningitis. After fever, the patient develops the paralysis. You should be thinking in terms of cerebral abscess, encephalitis and meningitis. Then following convulsions, if someone develops the paralysis, you should think of Todd's paralysis, cerebral hemorrhage and thrombosis. Cerebral hemorrhage and thrombosis. Hemorrhage, thrombosis, Todd's palsy, following convulsion. After convulsion, the patient has paralysis, hemorrhage, thrombosis, Todd's palsy. You have to look in that scenario. So if patient arising from the bed or patient was during sleep, the cerebral thrombosis come to your mind. At emotion, height of emotion, cerebral hemorrhage. During exertion activity, cerebral embolism. During fever, after fever, abscess, meningitis, encephalitis. Following convulsions, Todd's palsy, cerebral hemorrhage or thrombosis. Then comes to the point, how does the evolution of paralysis occurs? Evolution of paralysis. Paralysis extends over days to weeks, over hours to days. Sorry, if the paralysis occurs over hours to days, then you will say stroke in evolution. Over hours to days, then you will say stroke in evolution. Then paralysis total or maximum from the beginning. Maximum from the beginning. Then you will say it is completed stroke, usually completed within 6 hours. So maximum for the onset, maximum from the onset, the paralysis are total or maximum from the onset or the beginning. Then you say it is completed stroke and usually completed within 6 hours. Then increase in stepwise manners, repeated episodes of TIA leading to fully evolved stroke, that is called as the stuttering stroke. The examiner can ask, what is stuttering? Stuttering stroke. You will say increase in stepwise manner, that is repeated episodes of TIA leading to the fully evolved stroke. Repeated attacks of transient ischemic attacks leading to fully evolved stroke. So that is your stuttering stroke. Patient को repeated attacks हो रहे हैं TIA के और one day comes, then he develops the fully evolved stroke, that is your stuttering stroke. He was giving the warning. Repeated attacks of TIA was giving the warning, and then this was the warning given by the stuttering stroke. Stuttering stroke gives the warning that there is repeated attacks of TIA following which there is a fully evolved stroke, that is stuttering stroke. Stuttering stroke gives just a warning that I will occur someday, and it occurs. If the stroke is maximum from the beginning, that is completed stroke. If stroke extends over hours to day, that is the stroke in evolution. Then comes the question, what is the progress of paralysis? Progress of paralysis, either the progress of paralysis, whether the paralysis is improving, you should be knowing whether it is stationary, improving, or deteriorating. Improving, stationary, or deteriorating. A complete recovery usually indicates the cerebral embolism or demyelinating disease. If the patient has the complete recovery, then you should think of cerebral embolism or demyelinating disease. There is a complete recovery of paralysis. If it is complete recovery, ये ध्यान में रखना है, complete recovery हो गया, stroke हुआ था patient को and now the patient is completely recovered, then you should be thinking that it might be a case of cerebral embolism, demyelinating disease. He has completely recovered in embolism and demyelinating. So progress could be improving, stationary, or deteriorating. These are the progress. Then waxing and waning indicates demyelinating disease. Paralysis, waxing and waning indicates indicate demyelinating disease, that is multiple sclerosis. Then the degree and duration of paralysis, weakness or total loss of the power. With duration you have to mention whether it is just weakness or total loss of the power. Then you have to also say about the motor symptoms. Now we'll discuss few terminology in clinical neurology. Terms, we will discuss few terms which are important. Terms in clinical neurology. First is hemiplegia. Plegia means complete and paresis means partial paralysis. If it is plegia, it is complete paralysis, and if it is paresis, it is incomplete paralysis. First discussion is about hemiplegia. Is the paralysis of the one side of the body, one half of the body, especially the face, arm, leg. It is facio-brachiocrural paralysis. Facio-brachiocrural paralysis. The trunk is exempted due to bilateral innervation. Trunk does not involve in hemiplegia due to bilateral innervation. Hemiplegia usually indicates the paralysis of the one sided of the body. Hemiparalysis indicates the weakness of one side of the body, the face, arm, leg. Paraplegia, paralysis of both the lower limbs due to spinal cord lesion. Paraplegia, that is the complete loss of power of both the lower limbs due to spinal cord lesion. And paraparesis is the incomplete paralysis or the weakness of the both the lower limbs. The paraparesis, weakness, and paraplegia is paralysis. Then what is diplegia? The diplegia, cerebral what is diplegia? Diplegia, bilateral hemiplegia of cortical origin, where the lower limbs are more affected than the upper limbs. Where the lower limbs are more affected than the upper limbs. Bilateral hemiplegia of cortical origin. It is bilateral hemiplegia of cortical origin, where lower limbs are more affected than the upper limb. So it is basically the bilateral hemiplegia of cortical origin, where the lower limbs are more affected than the upper limbs. So bilateral hemiplegia of cortical origin, where the lower limbs are more affected than the upper limbs. That is your diplegia. Cerebral palsy is the example. Cerebral palsy में bilateral hemiplegia of cortical origin होता है. Bilateral hemiplegia of cortical origin. Then what is quadriplegia, tetraplegia? Paralysis of the all the four limbs and also the trunk, which is a feature of cervical cord disease. Quadriplegia is also called as tetraplegia. What is quadriplegia? Or examiner can say what is tetraplegia to confuse you. So you will see paralysis of all the four limbs. Paralysis of all the four limbs due to cervical cord lesion. Cervical cord lesion. Paralysis of all the four limbs. That is your quadriplegia, tetraplegia. Then the monoplegia is paralysis of one limb. Monoplegia is paralysis of one limb. Monoplegia is the paralysis of one limb. It could be brachial or it could be crural. Brachial paralysis is the monoplegia of the upper extremities, and crural paraplegia is one lower extremities is involved. Upper extremities brachial monoplegia, crural monoplegia, only one limb is involved is your monoplegia. Then crossed hemiplegia. What is crossed hemiplegia? Crossed hemiplegia is paralysis of the ipsilateral element of cranial nerves with contralateral hemiplegia, a feature of the brainstem disease. So crossed hemiplegia is a feature of brainstem disease. Here there occurs the ipsilateral cranial nerve palsy, ipsilateral cranial nerve paralysis, ipsilateral cranial nerve palsy, ipsilateral cranial nerve paralysis with contralateral hemiplegia. जो ipsilateral cranial nerve palsy होती है, it is LMN type in cerebral cross hemiplegia, which is the brainstem hemiplegia. brainstem disease का फीचर होता है crossed hemiplegia. cervical cord disease का फीचर था quadriplegia, tetraplegia. वैसे ही brainstem disease का फीचर है brainstem disease का फीचर है what was the feature of brainstem disease? Crossed hemiplegia, where there is ipsilateral element type of the cranial nerve palsy with contralateral hemiplegia. Then cruciate hemiplegia is the involvement of the lower limb with brachial monoplegia of one side with contralateral crural hemiplegia. Then bibrachial paralysis of both the upper extremities is bibrachial. If both extremities upper extremity both has been gone, then it is bibrachial hemiplegia. Bibrachial paralysis. Bibrachial paralysis is both the upper extremities gone. both upper extremities gone. Then cruciate hemiplegia is brachial monoplegia of one side with contralateral brachial monoplegia of one side with contralateral crural monoplegia. Crural monoplegia, brachial monoplegia, crural monoplegia. So it is indicates basically the cruciate hemiplegia is what is cruciate hemiplegia. Then you will say brachial monoplegia of upper extremities and crural monoplegia of lower extremities. Contralateral, ipsilateral brachial monoplegia, ipsilateral brachial monoplegia and contralateral brachial monoplegia of one side and with contralateral crural monoplegia, that is a cruciate hemiplegia. This is asked in the exams. What is cruciate hemiplegia? Then you will say brachial monoplegia of one side and cruciate monoplegia of contralateral side. Brachial monoplegia of one side and cruciate monoplegia of contralateral side indicates the cruciate hemiplegia. Then bilateral hemiplegia is paralysis of all the four limbs, trunks and total face. That is your bilateral hemiplegia. What is bilateral hemiplegia? Involvement of all the four limbs. I am discussing the bilateral hemiplegia, involvement of all the four limbs including your trunk and including your face, trunk and all the four limbs when gone. It is the bilateral hemiplegia. Then paraplegia with the right brachial monoplegia, it means the right arm is gone with both the lower limbs are gone. Three limbs are involved. Paralysis of the right upper arm and both the lower limbs, that is paraplegia with the right brachial monoplegia. So this you should be knowing. So I will tell you again, this is important. What is cruciate hemiplegia? Then you will say monoplegia of one side and contralateral cruciate monoplegia of other side. That is your cruciate hemiplegia. Monoplegia of one side, that is brachial with contralateral crural monoplegia. Hemiplegia and hemiparesis may be complete or incomplete. So this is usually few terminology you should be knowing. Then the examiner can ask what are the features of, can you elaborate the features of UMN lesion and LMN lesion? Features of UMN and LMN lesion. Then you have to elaborate it. Features of UMN and MNN lesion. Then UMN lesion, if there is UMN lesion, then you will say the pyramidal cells, generally the bad cells of area 4 and their axons up to the cranial nerve nuclei or the anterior horn cell are called the upper motor neuron, that is corticobulbar, corticonuclear and corticospinal tracts respectively. So कहाँ से UMN type start होता है? It starts in the best cells of area 4, the pyramidal cells and their axons. Pyramidal cells are present in the best cell of area 4, pyramidal cells and their axons up to the cranial nerve nuclei, that is your corticobulbar, or up to the anterior horn cell, that is your corticonuclear, and sometimes up to the spinal cord, that is your corticonuclear, are involved. So you have the pyramidal cells in area 4 of cortex. Best cells of area 4, that is the pyramidal cells and their axons, which can go up to the anterior horn cell, or which can go up to the cranial nerve nuclei or anterior horn cells. So if these axons, pyramidal cells along with their axons goes up to the anterior horn cell, then it is corticospinal tract, and if it is go to the cranial nerve nuclei, then it is your corticobulbar, corticonuclear. upper motor neuron type. So corticonuclear, corticobulbar or corticospinal tract, these are all your human type of tracts. Then what is the lower motor neuron lesion? Lower motor neuron lesion extends from the anterior horn cell up to the anterior horn cell and its dendrite up to the motor end plate, and cranial nerve nuclei with the cranial nerves constitute the cranial nerve nuclei with cranial nerves and anterior horn cells. Two things for LMN you have to remember: anterior horn cells with their dendrites up to the motor end plate, and also the cranial nerve nuclei. Cranial nerve nuclei with cranial nerves constitute the cranial nerve nuclei with cranial nerves and anterior horn cells with dendrites up to the motor end plate. Cranial nerve nuclei with cranial nerve up to the motor end plate, that forms the LMN type of anterior horn cell and dendrites up to the motor end plate. The word is LMN is motor end plate and cranial nerve nuclei along with the cranial nerves. LMN is the final common pathway for all the motor impulses, both voluntary and automatic. So LMN is the final common pathway, both the voluntary and automatic, information. LMN, lower motor neuron, is the final common pathway. Then the examiner can ask, what is motor unit? Then what will you say? So motor unit, it is defined as a single alpha motor neuron. It is defined as a single alpha motor neuron and muscle fiber it innervates. So this is the single alpha motor neuron with muscle fiber that it innervates. With muscle fiber that innervates form the motor unit. So what is motor unit? Motor unit is the single alpha motor neuron with motor unit that it innervates with muscle fiber that is single alpha motor neuron with muscle fiber that it innervates forms the motor unit. So basically it is the single alpha motor neuron with the muscle fiber that it innervates forms the motor unit. Then we'll see some differences between UMN and LMN palsy. This is very, very important. UMN and LMN type of nerve palsies, we will see their differences now. So if it is UMN, muscle groups or limbs are affected. Paralysis of individual muscle supplied by that segment or nerve. Here the muscle groups or limbs are affected if it is UMN. If it is LMN, it is the individual muscle which is supplied by the particular segment is affected. If muscle groups are affected, there is a single muscle is affected. This is important. So there is muscle groups. Here is a single muscle is affected. Muscle groups are affected, it is UMN. If it is a single muscle is affected, that is your LMN. Then paralysis of the voluntary movements, because of which there is a paralysis of the voluntary movements. Here the paralysis of the muscle. Here the muscle get paralyzed because only the individual muscles are affected. Here the group are affected, so the voluntary movements will lose. Here the single muscle is affected, so the paralysis of this muscle will occur. Atrophy and wasting are the cardinal features. Here in LMN type, atrophy and wasting are the cardinal feature. While wasting is minimal and is usually due to disuse atrophy. Wasting is minimal and is due to disuse atrophy. But the atrophy and wasting is the feature of LMN. Atrophy and wasting is the feature of LMN. While wasting is minimal and occurs because of the disuse atrophy in UMN. तो वेस्टिंग एट्रोफी अगर ज़्यादा मिलती है तो वो LMN के फेवर में जाएगा. LMN में एक मसल इफेक्ट होता है, UMN में ग्रुप्स इफेक्ट होते हैं. UMN में मोटर मूवमेंट जाता है, इसमें मसल पैरालाइज होता है LMN में. तो ये कुछ इंपॉर्टेंट चीज़ें जो आपको याद रखनी है. Another thing is that there is clasp knife specificity मिलेगा यहाँ पे UMN में clasp knife specificity and here you will get the flaccidity. Clasp knife specificity indicates hypertonia, tone बढ़ जाएगा. Flaccidity indicates the hypotonia, tone कम हो जाएगा. In LMN type, ये important है, याद रखना है, पूछ सकते हैं एग्जामिनर. Then fasciculations मिलता है in LMN. Fasciculations is present in LMN and it is absent in UMN. In UMN you will get the fibrillation. Fibrillation in UMN. Fascillations in LMN. Then power is very much affected here. Here the power is very much affected. Here the power is less affected. Not that much. Here it can go up to the grade 0 power in LMN type. LMN type में power is very much affected. Very much affected. Then we'll see the superficial reflexes, deep reflexes and coma. Three things. Superficial reflexes will be lost in both, whether it is UMN or LMN. Superficial reflexes will be lost. Deep tender reflexes, obviously the jerks will be brisk if it is UMN, and it is lost or diminished in LMN. When clonus is present in UMN, it is absent in LMN. Trophic changes is common here. Here the trophic changes is common in LMN. Here it is rare. Trophic changes is rare in UMN. Then plantar response is extensor here in UMN. Here it is flexor in LMN. Then reaction to degeneration in the muscle is absent. Here reaction to degeneration in the muscle is present. Here reaction of degeneration in muscle is absent. Reaction of degeneration in muscle. Here the muscle undergo degeneration. Here there is no degeneration of the muscle. So this you have to remember. These are the differences for UMN and LMN. Actually, there is no paralysis of the muscle in UMN palsy, and it can be proved by the fact that the hemiplegia patient may run away from the room if the room suddenly catches fire. Actual में there is no paralysis of muscle in UMN. Actual में no paralysis of muscle in UMN. And it can be proved by the fact that hemiplegia patient run away from the room if the room suddenly catches fire. So you don't get the true, there is no paralysis of the muscle in UMN. In UMN lesion, symptoms occur early than the signs, while the LMN lesion signs appear early than the symptoms. So दो चीज़ें अगर UMN है तो symptoms occur early than the sign, and अगर sign जल्दी हो रहा है तो वो indicate करता है LMN. Sign is more than the symptom. Sign appear early than the symptom. If symptoms are early than the sign, then it is UMN. If signs are early than the symptom, then it is LMN. Then comes the question, what are strokes? What is lacunar infarction? Importance of examination in hemiplegia. Different sources of in the heart for cerebral embolism. Special points. This we'll discuss now. Then the question is, what are strokes? Stroke is used to define the all forms of cardiovascular accident. A stroke is defined as the focal neurological deficit of abrupt onset due to vascular lesion lasting longer than 24 hours and is manifested either as brain infarction or hemorrhage. Stroke is a better term than CVA. So it is a focal neurological deficit. Stroke is the focal neurological deficit of abrupt onset due to vascular region and last more than 24 hours and is manifested either as brain infarction or brain hemorrhage. So it is the focal neurological deficit of abrupt onset due to vascular region lasting longer than 24 hours and is manifested either as the brain infarction or hemorrhage. Stroke is a better term than cardiovascular accident. Then comes the different types of cardiovascular accidents. What are the types of cardiovascular accident you know? Then you will say it could be cerebral thrombosis, cerebral embolism, cerebral hemorrhage, subarachnoid hemorrhage, hypertensive encephalopathy. So this is this you thrombosis and embolism, you know, subarachnoid hemorrhage, hypertensive encephalopathy. Then you know this again, thrombosis and hemorrhage, you know, embolism, you know, thrombosis, embolism, hemorrhage, embolism, thrombosis, subarachnoid hemorrhage, hypertensive encephalopathy. Others stroke are due to the multiple sclerosis. Inobvious stroke is because of the inobvious stroke. Inobvious stroke. What are the inobvious stroke? Then you will say inobvious stroke is seen in multiple sclerosis, Torts palsy, multiple sclerosis, cerebral hemorrhage or infarction, venous sinus thrombosis, subdural or epidural hematoma, and cerebral metastasis. So this is the inobvious CVA. CVAs are basically thrombotic, embolic, hemorrhagic, hypertensive, subarachnoid hemorrhage, and inobvious stroke because of the multiple sclerosis, Torts palsy, cerebral hemorrhage or infarction, then sinus thrombosis, subdural epidural hematoma, cerebral metastasis. Then gradual onset of hemiplegia. What are the causes? You should think if there is a gradual onset of hemiplegia. So there is the question, gradual onset hemiplegia, then you will say it is due to cerebral tumor. Cerebral tumor can lead to the gradual onset of hemiplegia. Then subdural hematoma, gradual onset. Cerebral abscess में भी gradual onset होता है. meningitis encephalitis में gradual onset का hemiplegia होता है. Then AIDS में due to toxoplasma और primary CNS lymphoma gradual onset hemiplegia, the generalized paralysis of insane. So ये सारे स्ट्रोक के जो हैं ग्रेजुअल ऑनसेट स्ट्रोक होता है इनमें, चाहे वो ट्यूमर हो, हेमाटोमा हो, एब्सेस हो, इन्फेक्शन लाइक मेनिंजाइटिस एंसेफलाइटिस. एड्स में भी ग्रेजुअल ऑनसेट का होता है. जनरलाइज पैरालिसिस, ये तो इतना इंपॉर्टेंट नहीं है, बट यू हैव टू रिमेंबर दी हेमाटोमा cause the gradual onset and tumor causes the gradual onset. So I will write here cerebral tumor and your causes the gradual onset of hemiplegia because of the hematoma. बाकी इन्फेक्शन से याद रख सकते हैं. बेसिकली द ट्यूमर एंड हेमाटोमा यू शुड नो that they cause the gradual, very gradually the patient will having the paralysis, whether it is hematoma or whether it is tumor. So gradual onset hemiplegia occurs in tumor or hematoma, subdural hematoma. Then 80% of the stroke is ischemic and 20% are hemorrhagic. You know, 80% is ischemic and 20% is hemorrhagic. Cerebral thrombosis and embolism result in stroke. Cerebral ischemia, whether it is thrombosis or embolism, result in cerebral ischemia and ultimately leading to the cerebral infarction. Cerebral vasculitis, for example, SLE, may also give rise to the cerebral infarction. Cerebral infarction is the combined cause of hemiplegia in the cerebral infarction is the commonest cause of hemiplegia in the elderly. Cerebral infarction literally means death of the brain tissue. Death of the brain tissue is cerebral infarction and it occurs in elderly and it is the commonest cause of hemiplegia in elderly. That is your cerebral infarction. Thrombosis and embolism result in ischemia and ultimately infarction. So whether it is thrombosis or whether it is embolism, ultimately they both lead to the cerebral ischemia and infarction. Cerebral ischemia and infarction. Whether it is embolism or thrombosis, it ultimately lead to cerebral ischemia and infarction. Then cerebral infarction is the commonest cause of hemorrhage in the elderly. Cerebral infarction may lead to death, means the death of the brain tissue. What are stroke mimickers? Then you have to say it is your stroke mimickers, your multiple sclerosis, hemiplegic migraine, cerebral tumor or abscess, head injury. Head injury. So stroke mimickers are multiple sclerosis, stroke mimickers, hemiplegic migraine. So here it is the multiple sclerosis and hemiplegic migraine. This can cause stroke mimicker. This is stroke mimicker. So multiple sclerosis and hemiplegic migraine can cause stroke mimicker. Looks like the stroke, whether it is multiple sclerosis or hemiplegic migraine. Besides these, other causes of stroke mimickers are the cerebral tumor or cerebral abscess can cause stroke mimicker and head injury. Tumor abscess and head injury can mimic the stroke mimickers. You should be knowing multiple sclerosis and hemiplegic migraine, stroke mimickers. Then comes the question, what is lacunar infarction? What is lacunar infarction? Lacunar infarction is basically the small deep infarcts involved as a result of atherothrombotic or lipohyalurotic occlusion of the perforating or penetrating branches within the brainstem. The lacuna cavity after the healing of the infarction measures. What is lacuna? Lacuna is basically the cavity which left after the healing of the infarction. Infection was there, when it heals, the cavity which is left is your lacuna. Lacuna is basically of the size of 3 millimeter to 2 centimeter. So lacunar infarction is the lipohyalurotic occlusion of the perforating or penetrating branchings of the within the brainstem. Lacuna literally means lake of fluid observed at the opacity. Lacuna is the infarction, the cavity which left after the infarction heals, after healing of the infarction. Lacunar infarction may present as pure motor stroke, pure motor hemiparesis, pure sensory stroke, ataxic hemiplegia, clumsy hand dysarthria syndrome. So pure motor hemiparesis, pure sensory, pure motor, ataxic hemiparesis and clumsy hand dysarthria syndrome. Cerebral palsy may occur after multiple lacunar infarcts. Multi-infarct dementia. Multiple lacunar infarct can give rise to the pseudobulbar palsy. Multiple lacunar infarcts can give rise to the pseudobulbar palsy. Then comes to the examination of the cardiovascular system. Importance of examination of cardiovascular system in hemiplegia. Cardiovascular system, why you are going to examine in hemiplegia? Then you will say cardiovascular, I am examining. The method of examination, you will set first of all the pulse rate, rhythm, whether regular, irregular in AF. You will get rate, rhythm, vessel wall, condition of the arterial wall, thickened or not, to look for the atherosclerotic changes, comparison with the opposite side. Then radiofemoral delay, whether there is any delay present or not, especially when the patient gives the history of intermittent claudication, and any special character where you will see brachial and carotid में character देखना होता है. So pulse के बारे में बताना है आपको, rate, rhythm, volume, condition, radiofemoral delay, all these things you have to sell on the pulse. Then cardiovascular system examination also can tell about the peripheral arteries, carotids, whether kinking is there, diminished pulsations or any bruit over the carotid are present or not. Kinking atherosclerosis में मिलता है. Bruit over the carotid indicates the atherosclerosis again, and present or not over the carotids. Examination of the neck is a must in cardiovascular accident, as carotid thrombus may dislodge and can cause cerebral thrombosis. As the cerebral thrombosis and carotid thrombosis may be dislodged and cause cerebral thrombosis. So neck examination is important in cardiovascular accident. Neck examination is very important. You have to see kinking, pulsation, bruit. These things you have to look for in the peripheral arteries. You also see the locomotor brachialis in the brachial artery to look for the feature of atherosclerosis. Then femoral you will check. Then artery dorsalis pedis artery you will check. Then any bruit over the eyeballs to look for the AV malformations. AV malformations. So bruit over the neck for AV malformation. AV malformation. Dorsalis pedis artery, femoral artery, brachial artery, locomotor brachialis, feature of arteriosclerosis, sorry. Then carotid kinking or any bruit you have to look. Then blood pressure is high. Blood pressure is high in cerebral hemorrhage and thrombosis. In hemorrhage and thrombosis, cerebral hemorrhage and thrombosis, blood pressure will be high and may also be high in subarachnoid hemorrhage. Then you have also be to see these jugular veins. In cardiovascular system, jugular veins you will look for this apical impulse, heart sounds, and a murmur. Always search for the mitral mid-diastolic murmur, especially in the case of cerebral embolism. You have to look for MDM murmur, mid-diastolic mitral murmur. You have to look in the case of cerebral embolism. Then other thing you can examine in a cardiovascular system in hemiplegia is the rheumatic heart disease, especially mitral stenosis. It can cause cerebral embolism. So you have to try to diagnose the mitral stenosis. Look for the murmur. Then hypertensive heart disease. Hypertensive heart disease, we already discussed that it can cause TIAs, lacunar infarction, cerebral thrombosis, cerebral hemorrhage, thrombosis, hemorrhage, lacunar infarction, TIAs, lacunar infarctions, thrombosis, hemorrhages. All these occur because of the high blood pressure, TIAs, lacunar infarctions, cerebral thrombosis, TIA, lacunar infarction, cerebral thrombosis, cerebral hemorrhage. Ischemic heart disease, you also see to look for the mural thrombosis may dislodge. Ischemic heart disease में mural thrombosis can dislodge. Then cyanotic congenital heart disease may give rise to cerebral abscess, paradoxical embolism. Cyanotic congenital heart disease can give rise to cerebral abscess, which can cause hemiplegia, and also can give rise to paradoxical embolism, which can cause hemiplegia. Then syphilitic heart disease, tabes dorsalis, generalized paralysis of instinct, not seen nowadays, tabes dorsalis. Then subclavian steal syndrome, the patient complains of dizziness, diplopia, ataxia, and collapse after the use of one arm. No neurodeficit is produced, but one should search for the difference between the pulse and BP in two upper limbs and a bruit over the suprascapular area resulting from the stenosis of the subclavian artery proximal to the origin of vertebral artery. This syndrome results from the stolen blood from the vein via the vertebral artery when the said arm is in use. The syndrome results from the stolen blood from the brain via the vertebral artery when the said arm is in use. So what is subclavian steal syndrome? Subclavian steal syndrome is important to learn about the subclavian steal syndrome. Subclavian steal syndrome. The patient complains of dizziness, diplopia, dizziness, ataxia, and collapse after the use of one arm. So patient को complaint होता है ये सब after the use of one arm only. No neurodeficit is produced, but one should search for the difference between the pulse and BP in the two limbs and a bruit over the suprascapular area. So after the use of one arm, patient develops these symptoms and it results from the stenosis of the subclavian artery proximal to the origin of vertebral artery. Thus, syndrome results from the stolen blood from the vein via the vertebral artery when the said arm is in use. So as you do the movement, you will be having ataxia, diplopia, collapse after the use of one arm, which occurs because as you are using the one arm, stenosis of the subclavian artery proximal to the origin of the vertebral artery stenosed. So this syndrome is when stolen blood from the brain. So it occurs because the blood gets stolen. This is your brain. This the arm you are moving. This arm you are moving. So there is always stenosis in the subclavian area. So when you are doing the movement, there is ischemia to this tissue, and it results because of the stolen blood. When this arm is used, the patient develops ataxia, diplopia, dizziness, means brain blood supply is getting reduced. Brain blood supply is getting reduced as person use the one arm. So why this is happening? Why the blood is getting reduced? You will say the blood is being stolen from the brain. Why these muscles of the arm? As the patient use the arm, the blood from the brain goes by the vertebral artery to the vessel supplying the arms, and that can reduce the blood flow to the brain, and that can manifest as ataxia, diplopia, dizziness, collapse after the use of one arm. No neurodeficit is produced, but one should search for the difference between the pulse and BP in two upper limbs and a bruit over the suprascapular area, resulting from the stenosis of the subclavian artery, which is proximal to the region of vertebral artery. So this syndrome results from the stolen blood from the brain by the vertebral artery, and the said arm is in use. So this is important. Carotid bruit. If in short, if you have to say what is the importance of cardiovascular system examination, then you will say I would like to look for carotid bruit, and I would like to look for the pulse, irregular pulse for this carotid bruit for atherosclerosis, irregular pulse for atrial fibrillation, and cardiac murmur for mitral stenosis, embolism, cardiac murmur. So this is important. Also, if there is a bradycardia, it indicates that there is a Cushing reflex is occurring because of the bleed in the brain. Then, what are the different sources of cerebral embolism in the heart? This is your heart. What are the sources for embolism in the heart? Then you will say atrial fibrillation, which could be due to ischemic heart disease, mitral stenosis, mitral regurgitation. Left atrial thrombosis may dislodge. F is a cause for the source of embolism. Then subacute bacterial endocarditis, left atrial myxoma, right to left shunt, as in paradoxical embolism in Fallot's teratology. Then left ventricular thrombus, left ventricular aneurysm, left ventricular thrombus, left ventricular aneurysm, mitral valve prolapse, prosthetic heart valve. So out of this you have to say about the source. You will say the source could be due to the valvular lesions in the heart. It could be mitral stenosis, mitral regurgitation, or sometimes it could be subacute bacterial endocarditis, ventricular aneurysm, subacute bacterial endocarditis, mitral stenosis, mitral regurgitation, then ventricular aneurysm, ventricular thrombosis. These are the sources. And left atrial myxoma, you forget left atrial myxoma. So these are the sources. myxoma हो गया, सब एक्यूट बैक्टीरियल एंडोकार्डाइटिस हो गया, valve lesions हो गए, फिर वेंट्रिकल में एनोरिज्म हो, वेंट्रिकुलर में थ्रोम्बोसिस हो गया, या फिर राइट टू लेफ्ट शंट एज इन पैराडॉक्सिकल एम्बोलिज्म, फैलोस टेराटोलॉजी. ये सब आपको याद रखना है. प्रोस्थेटिक वेल्व और माइट्रल वेल्व पर भी मेंशन किया हुआ है बुक्स में, तो वो आपको मेंशन करने हैं. देन कम्स टू द journal points. Then what are the general special points in physical examination in the case of hemiplegia? What are the special points? Then you will say the general survey examination of hemiplegia. Case of hemiplegia, general survey you will do. Then you will do the nervous system examination. Then you will do the cardiovascular, respiratory system, GIT tract, and the lympho-reticular system in the last. So this is the schema of examination. First is your general survey, nervous system, cardiovascular system, respiratory system, GIT system, lympho-reticular system. You have to examine in this way. So general survey, you will tell the patient is conscious, cooperative, angle of the mouth is deviate to the right side on attempting talking. Decubitus is supine position in bed at present. The decubitus is very important. You will see the upper left limb is flexed, adducted and semi-pronated, lying helplessly. So the paralyzed side will always be flexed. It will be flexed, it will be adducted and semi-pronated. Flexed, adducted and semi-pronated. Flexed, adducted, semi-pronated. The paralyzed side will be flexed, adducted, semi-pronated. Face we told is deviates to the right side because left side is paralyzed. Similarly, on the left side you will find the flexed, adduct and semi-pronating, which is lying helplessly. The upper limb, lower limb is extended, adducted and plantar flexed. It is extended, adducted. Here it was semi-pronated. Here is plantar flex. Plantar flex. So it is extended, adducted, plantar flex. It is extended, it is adducted and it is plantar flexed. Here it was flexed, adducted and semi-pronated. Here it is extended, adducted and plantar flex. Right side is within normal limit. You have to say neck veins neither engorged neither pulsatile. You have to say mention all the points in pulse. Condition of the artery wall may be thickened if you are suspecting it to be atherosclerosis. Then BP is compulsory to record BP in all the long cases. It is better to record BP on non-paralyzed limb. So you have to prefer the limb which is non-paralyzed to record the BP to avoid recording of the low BP due to vasomotor paralysis on the paralyzed side. 185 by 100 millimeter mercury in this patient. So BP will be low if you record on the paralyzed side. The low BP record due to vasomotor paralysis. You will get the low BP on the paralyzed side. So it is compulsory to record in the non-paralyzed service. Then respiration, you have to tell about the rate, rhythm type, depth and breathing pattern of the respiration in general survey. In general survey about the temperature, you have to record the axillary temperature. Do not take the oral temperature and facial palsy. Then edema may be present on the paralyzed side due to prolonged immobility, decreased venous and lymphatic flow, as well as the affection of the vasomotor nerves, reflux, sympathetic dystrophy. Any obvious deformity absent. Mention all the points in general survey. So edema on the paralyzed side you can get on prolonged immobility. You can get the edema on the paralyzed side. So this is the general survey. Now comes to the examination of nervous system. Nervous system examination of my patient. I will do it quickly. The patient you will say is conscious, alert, cooperative, higher mental function, higher functions including speech. Mention all the subheadings like level of consciousness, appearance and behavior, memory. No abnormality detected in the level of consciousness, appearance and behavior and memory, or within normal limit. You will say either the higher functions are within normal limit, you don't detect anything, or a bit dysarthric or unable to speak fluently. Patient may be a bit dysarthric or unable to speak fluently, and you will say it is right-handed person. Then cranium and spine, you have to tell it is within normal limit. Neck rigidity, kerning sign absent, carotids within normal limit. Then cranial nerves, for seventh nerve there is human type of paralysis of the left side of the face as evidenced by epiphora on the left side, flattened nasolabial fold, deviated angle of the mole to the right side while showing teeth, weakness of the buccinator orbicularis oris and platysma of the left side, upper face of the left side, frontal belly of occipiter frontalis, corrugator superiorlis and upper part of the orbicularis oculi escape the paralysis. What are the muscles escaping the paralysis? Frontal valley of occipitofrontalis, corrugator superciliaris, and upper part of the orbicularis oculi. So these muscles do not involve in human paralysis. Occipitofrontalis, corrugator superciliaris is corrugator superciliaris, upper part of the, this was the occipitofrontalis, orbicularis oculi, orbicularis oculi will escape, occipitofrontalis will escape, then corrugator superciliaris will escape. This is your, what is oculi, what type of oculi it is? It is orbicularis oculi. It is not involved in human type of paralysis as upper face is escaping. Then other cranial nerves, fundoscopy we will do for papilledema. Mention the subheadings under the different cranial nerves. No abnormality detected. This was the general survey about the nervous system, conscious, cooperative, higher functions, cranium, spine, neck rigidity, cranial nerves you told, and then comes to the motor function. Motor functions you will say on the right side and on the left side. What are the motor functions? You will say nutrition normal on the right side, no wasting seen. On the left side nutrition is normal, plus write down the attitude of the left side in nutrition, the decubitus, from the decubitus no wasting is seen on the left side. Tone in the upper limb and lower limb on the right side is normal, while it is class mass spaced in the left side, both upper and lower limb. Flexor tone is increased in more in the upper tone, and extensor tone is increased more in the lower limb. Grade 3 power in both the limbs, upper and lower limb in left side, while it is grade 5 power in upper and lower limb on right side. Then coordination could not be tested on the left side, while coordination is upper and lower limb is normal on right side. Coordination is not tested in on the left side. Then involuntary movements there is none. This is about the nutrition, tone, power, coordination, and involuntary movements. Then sensory functions you will say superficial, deep, and cortical sensations. No abnormality detected in the superficial, cortical, and deep sensation. Superficial, deep, and cortical sensation, no abnormality detected. So you should be knowing what are superficial sensation, what are deep sensation, what are cortical sensations. In this you don't get any abnormality in the cortical, superficial, and deep sensations. Then you will mention the subheadings for reflexes. Superficial reflexes are three: abdominal, charismatic, and plantar. Abdominal is on the right side is normal in the upper, middle, and lower part, while it is lost in the left side. Right side the abdominal reflex is normal, on the left side it is lost. Similarly, cremastic is normal in the right side and it is lost in the left side. Plantar response is flexor in the right side and it is extensor in the left side, which is abnormal. This is about the superficial reflexes. What are the superficial? Abdominal, cremastic, and plantar. Now the deep reflexes, which are the biceps, triceps, supinator jerk, knee jerk, ankle jerk, and colonus. This is all normal and colonus is absent on the normal side, that is right side, while the jerks are brisk on the right side. Then swallowing, that is the swallowing, bowel, bladder are within normal. So visceral function you have also have to tell that swallowing, bladder, bowel is normal. Bladder, bowel, and swallowing is swallowing, bladder, bowel. Visceral function is normal. Other reflexes, premolar reflexes, Gabler tap is normal, Gras reflex is absent, palmar-malar reflex is absent. So other reflexes are absent like Gras, palmar-malar. Trophic changes are absent. Trophic changes feature more of a LMN type. You know, trophic changes is seen more common in LMN type. Trophic changes are absent here. Cellular functions are within normal limit. Autonomic functions are normal. Stance and gait, classical hemiplegic gait. The patient walks by lifting the pelvis while the left leg is making circumduction. So the patient walks by tilting the pelvis while the left leg is making the circumduction. This is the classic hemiplegic gait. Then cardiovascular system. See the answer. We have already discussed the cardiovascular system. Then respiratory system. In a case of hemiplegia, respiratory में you have to tell about the shape of the chest, movement of the chest, trachea and apex beat, percussion, normal resonant rate on both sides, breath sound, vesicular breath sound, vocal resonance normal on both sides, adventitious sound none. So normal routine जो examination लिखना है रेस्पी का. Then GIT tract and genitourinary, GI and genitourinary. Then you will say mouth, tongue, teeth, gum, no abnormality in the mouth, tongue, teeth, gum. Mouth is there, teeth are there, tongue is there, gum is there. It is no abnormality. Shape of the abdomen within normal limit, umbilicus inverted, rigidity absent, hepatosplenic not present, any lump, no lump felt, fluid thrill, shift intolerance absent, precaution for the bladder fullness done. Auscultation normal peristaltic sound, genital no abnormality detected, per rectal not done. Then lymphorectal system anemia is absent, lymphadenopathy is absent, sternal tenderness is absent, and hemorrhagic spots are absent. So anemia, lymphadenopathy, sternal tenderness, hemorrhagic spots, these are all absent in lymphoreticular system, anemia, lymphadenopathy, sternal tenderness, hemorrhagic spots. Then clinical types of hemiplegia. Clinical types of hemiplegia. We'll discuss this clinical type of hemiplegia. Clinical types of hemiplegia, it could be either clinically, hemiplegia could be either complete hemiplegia or it could be incomplete hemiplegia, or it could be crossed hemiplegia. Crossed hemiplegia, as we've seen, brainstem lesion where there is a element type of the ipsilateral cranial palsy and contralateral hemiplegia, where the ipsilateral element type cranial palsy and contralateral hemiplegia. Side of lesion is in the brainstem, that is a crossed hemiplegia. Discuss it. We have discussed it. Crossed. Complete hemiplegia is your UMN type 7th nerve palsy on the side of hemiplegia. The 7th nerve UMN type 7th nerve palsy on the side of hemiplegia. That is your complete hemiplegia. Incomplete hemiplegia, hemiplegia is there but there is no 7th nerve involvement. Hemiplegia is there but without 7th nerve involvement. Hemiplegia without 7th nerve. Hemiplegia with 7th nerve involvement is your complete hemiplegia. Hemiplegia without 7th nerve involvement is your incomplete hemiplegia. And crossed hemiplegia is ipsilateral 7th nerve element type with contralateral hemiplegia is your crossed hemiplegia. Then comes the another question. What is the importance of headache, convulsions and coma? The features of raised ICT in stroke. So क्या importance है headache का, convulsions का और coma का in stroke? So we'll write here the headache, convulsion importance and importance of coma in stroke. Headache, severe headache accompanying the paralysis indicates if headache is there, it indicates subarachnoid hemorrhage, cerebral hemorrhage, hypertensive encephalopathy. So if a patient with hemiplegia having the headache, you should think of hemorrhage, encephalopathy, subarachnoid hemorrhage. Very simple. Headache could be bleed हो गया brain में, it could be subarachnoid bleed or cerebral hemorrhage, parenchymal bleed, or it could be hypertensive encephalopathy. Then convulsions का क्या importance है? If then headache preceding the paralysis for months indicate this. If headache occur before the paralysis occur, that is before months, this it indicates this there occur the headache and then should develop the paralysis. So headache occurs before months, so many, so it would be ixoles, space occupying lesion, or subdural hematoma is there. Mild headache you see in cerebral thrombosis and embolism. Embolism and thrombosis you will get the mild headache. Mild headache, very mild headache indicates thrombosis or embolism. Mild headache. Convulsions, generalized convulsions preceding the paralysis. So first convulsions हुआ, बाद में पैरालिसिस हो गया, दैट इंडिकेट्स द टोर्स पाल्सी पोस्ट एपिलेप्टिक. फर्स्ट convulsion then paralysis. If convulsions followed by paralysis there occur, that indicates the Tor's palsy. Convulsions can occur in hypertensive encephalopathy and space occupying lesion. Hypertensive encephalopathy, even hemorrhage can cause your convulsions. Even space occupying lesion can cause your convulsions. Then focal or general convulsion occurring months prior to the paralysis, that is similar, same that convulsions हो रहा है तो space occupying lesion तो नहीं है, hypertensive encephalopathy तो नहीं है. Convulsion just prior to the paralysis may be seen in hemorrhage. If convulsion occurring so many months before, convulsion occurring before months, if convulsion occurring just prior to paralysis, just prior to paralysis or just after, before months convulsion occur, then develops the paralysis, that's space occupying. But convulsion occur just prior to the paralysis, then you should think of cerebral hemorrhage, cerebral embolism. Convulsions do not occur in subarachnoid hemorrhage, so important. Convulsions do occur in cerebral thrombosis, cerebral embolism, but it is just prior to the paralysis onset. You have to think in terms of hemorrhage, thrombosis, cerebral hemorrhage, thrombosis, embolism, three things. Then if the patient is unconscious, but with hemiplegia, commonly the hemorrhage will be there. Patient will be unconscious if hemorrhage, cerebral hemorrhage will be there. That is the brain parenchyma is involved, cortex is involved, so patient will go unconscious. From the beginning you can get an idea the patient is unconscious, his cortex is involved. In cerebral thrombosis, embolism, subarachnoid hemorrhage, hypertensive encephalopathy, usually the patient remains conscious but may be drowsy. अगर थ्रोम्बोसिस, एम्बोलिज्म, अरेक्नाइड हेमरेज एंड हाइपरटेंसिव पेशेंट ड्राउजी होता है. अनकॉन्शियस अगर हो गया तो वो ब्रेन में ब्लीड हो गया. बाकी अगर एम्बोलिज्म, थ्रोम्बोसिस में पेशेंट ड्राउजी जरूर होता है बट अनकॉन्शियस नहीं होता है. अनकॉन्शियस मीन्स सेरेब्रल हेमरेज. Now the question comes, what is the projectile vomiting of increased intracranial tension? It is the sudden vomiting which is not preceded by nausea. What is projectile vomiting of raised eyes? It is sudden vomiting without nausea. Nausea नहीं होता है तो वो projectile vomiting होती है. Sudden vomiting which is not preceded by nausea is your projectile vomiting. Remember it once for all. Sudden vomiting, no nausea. Hemiplegia without seventh nerve involvement, incomplete hemiplegia. Hemiplegia with seventh nerve involvement, complete hemiplegia. But the involvement of the seventh nerve should be UMN type. And if there is a LMN type, seventh nerve involvement ipsilateral and contralateral hemiplegia, that is crossed hemiplegia, the lesion is in the brainstem. Then what are the questions that you can put in a hemiplegic or a paraplegic patient with regard to the bowel and bladder symptoms? This is important. You have to cram it somehow. What are the questions you are asking in a patient with the bowel and bladder? Is you will ask, is there any increased frequency or urgency? Frequency or urgency? Burning sensation? Is there any problem in initiating the micturition? Whether there is hesitancy or precipitancy. Initiating the micturition में कोई problem है? Burning sensation तो नहीं है. Frequency, urgency तो नहीं है. Can you feel passing the urine? Can you stop the flow of urine? In the midstream at will? Can you stop the flow of urine at will in the midstream? Then is there any dribbling? Is there any dribbling in the urine? Dribbling of urine. Is there any sense of bladder fullness? Is there any rectal disorder, incontinence of the stool, diarrhea, constipation, or any difficulty in anal sensation? Is there any associated rectal disorder or difficulty in anal sensation? You have to ask. Is there any disorder of potency in males? You have to ask. Have you ever catheterized in recent past? Have you ever catheterized in recent past? These are important. 10th, have you ever catheterized in recent past? It is important for a hemiplegic patient. Then 1, 2, 3 points like, is there any increased frequency or urgency, burning sensation, any problem in initiating the micturition? These are all important in hemiplegia. While in paraplegia, all points are important. In hemiplegia, I repeat bladder, three important points, four important points, that increased frequency, urgency, burning sensation, problem in initiating the micturition, and ever catheterized before. Then type of bladder involvement in your patients. What type of bladder is involved in your patient? If you are saying the bladder is involved, then usually the chief complaint of the patient is burning micturition at present, seen in many cases as he was catheterized on admission, and as such now suffering from UTI. There is no loss of bladder control. So burning sensation indicates patient को catheterized था, उसको UTI हो गया, hemiplegic patient को burning sensation तभी आ रहा है. Point out the signs of UMN lesion in your patient. So examiner can ask, can you demonstrate the signs of UMN lesion in your patient? What are the signs of UMN lesion in your patient? Then you will say 7th nerve UMN type of palsy, upper face on the left side escaped the paralysis. So UMN 7th nerve, you started from the above. Then loss of power, then tone, clasp knife spasticity, hypertonia is there, loss of power is there, reflux is abdominal is lost, jerks are brisk, plantar is extensor, jerks are brisk, abdomen is lost, 7 PTRP. All the features are left side in this patient. Add clonus if present. So you have to say like this. These are the signs. Then why there is 7th nerve UMN type of paralysis in hemiplegia? Why there is 7th nerve palsy UMN type in hemiplegia? The 7th nerve nuclei are divided into upper and lower part by the arbitrary horizontal line. So the cranial nerve nuclei are divided into the 7th nerve cranial are divided into the upper and the lower part by the arbitrary. This is the arbitrary line. The upper and the lower part, the cranial nerve nuclei. This is cranial nerve nuclei. 7th nerve cranial divided into upper and lower part by the arbitrary line. And the upper part supplies the muscles of the upper face, while the lower part supplies the lower face. So this is the face. Upper part supplies the upper face, and lower part supplies the lower face. Lower part supplies the lower face, upper part supplies the upper face, lower part supplies the lower face. All the cranial nuclei are bilaterally supplied by the pyramidal fibers except the lower part of the 7th nerve nuclei, which receive pyramidal fibers only from the opposite pyramidal fibers. So there are pyramidal fibers coming from the brain. These are the pyramidal fibers. It supplies upper part. Upper part is supplied bilaterally by the pyramidal fibers on both the sides, while paralateral supplies the pyramidal fiber supplies the contralateral, supplies only the contralateral part of the nucleus, while the lower part of the 7th nerve nuclei receives the pyramidal fibers from the opposite side, while the upper part receives the pyramidal fibers. The upper part of the nuclei, because the innervation of the nuclei is such that the upper nuclei receives the pyramidal supply from both side of the, because there is a dual innervation of the nuclei of the cranial nerve from the cortex, while the cortex will give only ipsilateral, only the contralateral supply, not dual supply is there. So this thing you have to remember. because of dual innervation of the cranial nerve nuclei of the upper part, so the upper face escapes the paralysis in this case. Then comes the question, I would like to repeat is that the seventh nerve nuclei are divided into upper and lower part by the arbitrary horizontal line, and the upper part supplies the muscles of the upper face while the lower part supplies the lower face. All the cranial nerve nuclei are bilaterally supplied by the pyramidal fibers, that is the corticonuclear fibers, except the lower face of the seventh nerve nuclei, which receives pyramidal fibers only from the opposite side, so the lower face is easily affected. That is UM type of the seventh nerve palsy in a patient of hemiplegia. Then about the trunk and abdominal muscles in hemiplegia. Role of trunk and abdominal muscle in hemiplegia. Trunk and abdominal muscles in hemiplegia. These are not supplied. These are not involved in classical hemiplegia. Lesion is at the internal capsule due to their bilateral representation at the cortex. These are not involved in classic trunk and abdominal muscles are not involved in classical hemiplegia. The lesion at the internal capsule. Abdominal muscles, the root value is T8 to L1. T8 to L1 is your abdominal muscle. And do the rising test and analyze the Bohr sign. You will do the rising test and you have to analyze the Bohr sign. Bohr sign. These are not involved in usually abdominal muscles, and these are not involved in classical hemiplegia. Abdominal muscles. Do the rising test and do the analyze the Bohr sign. Intercostal muscles, that is T1 to T12, that is your intercostal muscles. During respiration, observe the movements of the intercostal muscles as well as the ribs. Then extensors of the spine, all the segment of the spinal nerve. Patient lie prone and tries to raise his shoulder from the bed against the examiner resistance. So extensors of the spine you will check. Patient will try to raise the shoulder from the bed against the examiner's resistance. Back muscles, erector spinae are seen to contract. So extensor spinae P into crest. So this is the patient. He's lying back and he will try to up his shoulder against the examiner resistance, and you will see the contraction of the erector spinae muscle. So the extensor of the spine, all the segments of the spinal nerve will be tested. So this is just the part 1 of hemiplegia. I will discuss the second part next video.